Hello, everybody. This is Joe Moore, CEO, co-founder of Psychedelics Today. I'm joined by Alex Horton from Heroic Hearts Project. How are you today, Alex?
I'm doing good. Good. How are you?
Good. Great. Thanks for joining us. I'm uh, an epic fan of Heroic Hearts Project, have been for a long time, and I'm happy to finally meet you, get to chat with you about Heroic Hearts Project and a little bit about your experience in Vital, and can't wait. So today, where are you joining me from?
My wife and I have actually been living in an Airstream for the last year, so we are down in Joshua Tree right now, which is pretty nice. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Yeah, and that's not a green screen. Those are real Dr. Seuss
Those
trees
are
out there.
those are real.
Yeah, I couldn't believe them the first time I saw them. But thank you
Mhm.
for joining from California. This is great. And
Mhm.
I'm curious. I'm gonna run this a little bit like a podcast. I'm sorry, because that's my orientation. um,
Yeah, of
can you
course.
tell me a little bit about your background and how you kind of found your way towards psychedelics generally?
Yeah, for sure. So background, I spent over a decade plus in the Army Special Operations community. Um, There was a program about 10 years into the global war on terror that they realized they needed to have women more embedded with special operations teams in Afghanistan. So I signed up and made it through assessment and selection back in 2011, 2012, and deployed with Ranger Regiment and some other Tier 1 organizations over the years. I ended up becoming in charge of the program and did that for about 6 more years. During that time, we lost 2 of our CSTs, and so definitely took on this without, anyone probing me, sense of responsibility and guilt and shame and all of the other feelings that come along with that. Um, in 2016, I got my yoga teacher training certification and started promoting yoga and meditation within the special operations community as a way to help heal, those I worked alongside with. Um, Fast forward quite a bit. I got to around 2018, 2019, realizing that I was not doing well mentally, physically. After 6 deployments, my body was pretty burnt out. And also I woke up to the realization of what we're doing there and and that I didn't align morally or ethically with, who I was, and it took a a lot of peeling back that onion to recognize, how far I had strayed away from what was important for me or to me and what made sense. I started going to therapy. I was medically retired, which was really difficult to go through, as that's not the way I wanted to leave. And during that time, the VA and the military do the best that they can, but they do it's very difficult when they're constantly telling you that you're broken, you're broken, you're broken, and how that impacts the psyche whilst trying to go to therapy and heal from those wounds. Um, so like many veterans have experienced, I was put on the gamut of medications. Um, I tried to follow the protocols. I did, you know, prolonged exposure. I did EMDR. I did all the medications that they gave me. I was taking uppers and downers and painkillers and things to sleep, and none of it was working. If anything, it was making me worse. It was making me have deeper depressions, and I was also, self-medicating with lots of alcohol. Um, Kind of a I hate to say typical story from our communities, but that really is kind of the typical story of a veteran these days, especially from the global war on terror. And yeah, I got to a point where I hit my breaking point, and I couldn't do it anymore. I was pretty suicidal. And my wife now at the time was my girlfriend, and she couldn't do it anymore. My anger levels were, really uncontrollable, which was just my only form of emotion that I had been taught over the years, which underneath that was grief and sadness and everything else that I had, kind of buried deep down. Um, so I was driving south actually kind of with a plan in place to take my own life, and I got a call from a former cultural support team member who had been receiving her own healing in the psychedelic space, and she was essentially like, I can get you down to Mexico, next month. And that's kind of the trajectory from there. I don't like to say one moment. I like to stray away from saying that one moment, brought me back, because I think it's important to really hyper focus, obviously, with the vital course, and why I'm passionate is the integration piece, but I will say that it brought me back home to myself, with
Mm.
that first journey to really understand how much my nervous system had been hijacked, how much I was no longer myself, what my brain chemistry had turned into. I had TBI as well, so doing psilocybin and 5-MeO that first time really helped me get through the door. I also like to say, the phrase between stimulus and response, we have choice. Um, I never saw that choice before. I didn't even know what that meant. I couldn't even conceptualize it. There was a trigger of any kind, whether that be someone cutting in front of me or my an argument with my wife, and I would just skyrocket. And now I could kind of sit back and see more and how I should be reacting and what was important and what wasn't. So from that point, I took a lot of time. It took a lot of time to integrate those first experiences and figure out where I wanted to go with my life and what was next, and who this new person and version of myself was. Um, it brought me back to writing, which is something I'm very passionate about, and art and poetry, which has been very, very, helpful through integration. Over a period of time, I started to recognize how much I had strayed from what I wanted to do with my life, and did what, society told me to do. As soon as I got out of the military, I went and got a master's degree, which is absolutely a mistake to jump right into an education. Um, so now kind of fast forward to now, I wanted to learn more about, these medicines and how they can help, and I think education is really, really important in this space, because the underground can kind of be like the wild, wild west, and, taking care of veterans is my primary goal, and getting the help that other people need, but doing that in a, ethically and morally safe way. So I joined the Vital course, and I've been also working with Heroic Hearts Project for the last year. And, a big passion and thing that I noticed when stepping into the space was that there's one demographic, a veteran, that is kind of leading this charge. And that's typical. There's the majority of service members are predominantly white men. However, there is a large majority too that are minority veterans. And I'm on the board of Minority Veterans of America. And, the goal has really been to be a voice in that space and say, hey, we need healing too. And we may need it a little different. We may need, depending on where someone is in their stage of healing. If they were where I was when I was so angry, I got out and realized, oh wow, this organization that I've been working for basically since I was 18 is racist and sexist and homophobic, and all of these people that were, you know, my friends that I served with, and not everyone, but a large majority, when I started speaking out about those things, got very angry, and I lost a lot of people along the way, stating kind of truths. I actually see it similar in interestingly enough, the phrase in the military is like, well, we all wear the same uniform, we're all the same. And that's just not the reality, that isn't. And in the psychedelic space, people are like, well, we're all one. And we are all one. We are all connected. And also, depending on where someone is in their stage of healing, they may need a different level of care. Right. So I've been working with Heroic Hearts. It's actually one of the only nonprofits. When I approached some of the other nonprofits in the space, saying, "Hey, we may need to do all female retreats. We may need to do all LGBTQ retreats, all BIPOC retreats. You know, to allow people to get in the door and be around people that look like them, that they can relate to, that they can understand, and have had similar experiences." I mean, and once you start on that healing journey, you know, co-ed retreats and all of the other ways of healing are important too. As I've stated many times, that every time I see a male veteran heal, it also heals me, you know? But that initial go, I went to an all-female retreat, and that was really important for me to feel like I was in a safe area and a safe space to really be vulnerable. So that's kind of the shortened version of the journey and what brought me here.
Thank you so much for that. And it's really a broad thing. So thanks for the broad scope too. People
Mhm,
don't always get a story like that from veterans. So thank you so much. Well,
mhm.
how often people really get stories from veterans that are meaningful like that.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah, we had a Veterans Day topic with a few of my friends years ago. I
Mhm.
think I recorded it shortly after Meet Delic in Las Vegas a few years back, and it was like in my hotel room with three veteran friends, and it was like gut wrenching the whole time.
Mm,
So um,
mhm,
people should understand that, and I'm glad, Alex, you're also bringing the DEI elements to the military and veterans topic, and we
mhm.
find the same thing. Like people should have groups available that are safe for them, that feel safe.
Mhm.
Like, have you seen the film advertised recently, A Table of Our Own?
No, I haven't. I'll check it out though.
Yeah, it's great. It's kind of Black specific psychedelic community saying we want our own table. Like we don't, we're
Yeah,
just going to do our thing. And it's a robust community already. And when Black people are together, they feel safer and can be themselves more. And there's like a lot of
yeah.
layers there. And I'm sure
Yes.
in similar to LGBTQ communities, like I recently, became friends with a gigantic group of gay men. Can't wait for there to
Mhm.
be more gay women in there, and
Mhm.
it's such a different experience to have that many gay
Mm.
friends, and I'm so thankful, so thankful.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
seeing their needs as different from mine's obviously true. It's like, yeah,
Mhm.
of course we need our own spaces for whatever kind of like marginalized group we have.
Yeah, you know, I recently was having this conversation with a friend too, because they were like, "Do we really need to have these separate spaces?" And I was like, "Not always. That's not always the answer, right?" And when you're a queer person, I'm just gonna use that because I can speak from that lens, right? And you're around all queer people, there's this mutual understanding, and you don't have to explain yourself. And that alone provides a level of like, like a rest button. Whereas when you're in mixed company, you may say something and someone's going to be, and not in a rude way, but like, hey, I don't understand that. What does that mean? And then you're finding yourself educating other people. And that's a very consistent, right? Within the BIPOC community and with females. And it's like, I don't need to take the time right now to explain this to you. Like if I'm in a healing environment, that's not the time and place for that. So yeah, I do think that, that's important.
Why do you think people are so opposed? Like, have you thought about that at all? Like, threatening or something? I don't really understand it.
Um, I mean, it's a great question. I think the desire when you get into the space and you've done some of this work, the desire to all heal as a collective is very strong and that we are all connected, right? That's a reality that you start to understand. And I think it is beneficial to heal alongside people that are different than you to bridge that gap because we are so divided these days, more so than I think we've been in a while. And so I can see the benefit to that. So that would be my only thought process. But I do think there is a part of it that is like, well, why do you need it's either jealousy or maybe resentment isn't the right word, but um yeah, just desire to have everyone included in the thing, um, is all I could come up with, but I don't fully get it either because it's I mean, there's all male veteran retreats all of the time, not because they meant to do it, it's just because that's the demographic that they're serving predominantly, um, and they see a lot of healing in that, so it's like, we want the same thing. That's it,
Hmm.
you know?
I think a thought that came up as you were speaking there is I think there's a lack of understanding culturally around
Mm,
trauma and like safety, those two things. And, we need to feel safe to heal. We need to
yeah,
feel safe enough to heal. It's not like we necessarily need to feel perfectly safe, but at least a
right,
certain margin of safety. And if we don't
right,
have that, where's the healing going to
yeah.
go?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sure this has happened. I haven't seen it personally, but I was just recently at an all-female retreat, and I was talking to one of the Heroic Heart staff, who is a male that we have on staff who's phenomenal, who is there supporting. And 2 things came up for him. One was when we did the initial group share on the first day. Out of the 12 women there, at least 8 had been sexually abused by either a familial person in their upbringing or, someone in their family in their upbringing and been raped in the military. That's a huge percentage, and this individual was like, "I wish other men could sit in this and see." And then he was like, "Also, I wonder though, if other men were here, would that level of vulnerability come out?" Right? And then
Mm,
the other piece to that was, um, he recognized the percentage. If that many women have had that experience, then when you're doing an all-male retreat or you're having a co-ed retreat, how many of those men were the abuser? And how do you hold space for that? If there is a woman there who's survived military sexual trauma, and the guy across from her is the one who enacted military sexual trauma on somebody else, are we able to hold space for that in the same retreat? And
mm,
maybe we can, and maybe there's a lot of healing in that connection. But I also know that a lot of the women that just came off this retreat, one of the biggest things they said was that they had that safe space to hold each other, to mirror to each other what had happened to them, to have a frankly, a Me Too moment of no one ever talks about that. No one talks about the depth, and to men, the sexual abuse within the military is rampant. And I look at it as how are we recruiting for the military? And if you look at how we're recruiting, right, we're recruiting from marginalized populations and people who are in dire situations. Not all of the time. There's some people that aren't, but a lot of the time. And then you're looking at building trauma on top of trauma, right?
mm,
You have hurt people. So if people are entering the military with a lot of trauma, maybe abuse from their parents, sexual abuse from their family, and then they're going into the military, they haven't been equipped or understand how to deal with any of that. And then they're adding trauma on top of that. And then their emotions are dysregulated. They're dysregulated. And how do they deal with that? A lot of booze, a lot of alcohol, and not behaving and treating people with the respect and kindness and compassion that is needed to live. So it
mm.
makes sense. Doesn't make it, you know, but yeah, it makes sense.
A close family member of mine actually left the military because of abuse. And
Yeah.
so I've been living with that for a long time. And I just know it's there. Yeah, and understanding safety and running groups, it's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah,
Mhm.
I actually, triggered somebody at a retreat once as a retreat leader, despite like
Mm.
me, I thinking I did nothing, but it's
Mhm.
part of what you're there to do as a retreat leader is get projected on. So like it
Yes.
was tough, but it's also like
Yes.
it's also okay they had that reaction. And it was like,
Yeah.
good to actually do a big debrief on it in the larger group. It was really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that actual experience just happened with, and I mean, there's gonna be, what's the word I'm looking for? It's Monday. When trans, when someone thinks you're somebody else
Right, right, right.
under the medicine.
I don't know
What's the
that
word?
word actually. What is that?
Not
It's probably like a
transmission, but
transpose in music. You're like, "Oh, now you're
yeah.
Mozart," a little bit, but whatever.
But there was a experience where the male that was there had told one of the women, to lay down, and then she did, and, he said, "Good girl," and the next day
Whoa.
she was like, the level of rage that she had, for that experience. But it was a great one, it was a great learning experience just to watch what you're saying, and two, it actually helped her kind of bring that anger to the surface and sit with it, which she needed to do, but,
Mm,
yeah, that can happen. So,
yeah. So I wanna shift gears slightly and talk about, like, Vital for a little bit. Like,
mm.
what made you kind of interested in Vital, and how has your experience been so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think multiple things. First, just full transparency. I'm going to go back to school again because I think I'm a bit sadistic. So I want to get my licensure. So I'll be going back to school for a PsyD program in clinical psych. But previous to that, I hadn't made that decision yet, and I didn't know how uh, forward I wanted to go. And looking at all the programs, there's some that are very specific and only including people with licensure, um, which as someone who's working predominantly, in the global south in indigenous spaces, I kind of turned my head to that of there's so many people, as you know, that do not have westernized education and are well more equipped than myself and many included in the space, right? So um, I've been following I've been following Psychedelics for Today and all the education that you guys push out for a while. And, I think it's a really reputable organization that's doing their best you guys are doing your best to educate in the right way, so that we don't make the mistakes that we did previously, and so that, people understand the responsibility that they're taking on and the level of reverence we should have when working with any of these medicines. So that was my initial, and, um and yeah, since just being in the course, I mean, it's absolutely lived up to my expectations with, the level of, people in the space that are, very well known, that are coming on to teach us, not from the indigenous practices to, the clinical aspect of clinical trials and what that looks like and what's happening there, to talking about coaching and integration, to talking about ethics, to talking about, diversity and all the things that we previously discussed, and how important all of that is. I mean, the more the course goes on, the more I'm like, this is never ending with education, and no one should be doing that. I mean, there's other courses, I won't say their names, but some of them are very short, and then they're giving like a stamp of approval. Okay, go out and now you're free to coach and you're free to do all these things, which I find very dangerous. I don't think other veterans like when I say this in the space, but my biggest frustration is when a veteran goes on 1 or 2 retreats and then comes back, and I know it happens in the civilian sector too, but comes back and then starts serving medicine to people. And once you get into the space and you actually start working and you actually start sitting in retreats and start holding space, you realize there's so much that could happen. And to just jump in like that without some semblance of education or some semblance of understanding of the depth that people can go, I just find to be dangerous. So I always advocate for veterans, say, like, I know this community is amazing. It's there's a lot here, and I can see that it probably seems appealing to jump into, and also take a beat. Take a beat and integrate and do your work first, because if you don't, then you're going to be projecting and hurting other people. um, so I think that's the big initial why, was I wanted to have as much education. I will continue to, educate myself going forward, because I'm a novice, and I think I will act like a novice in the space until the day that I die. And I hope that more people in the space act that way, because otherwise we can hurt people, and that's the last thing I want, because I think that's the last thing we all want, right? We all want healing for people.
Hmm. Yeah. The the concept of hubris is under discussed in the space. Um,
It is.
and we modeled a lot of what we do in Vital off of the Groff training for breath work. That
Mhm.
training takes at least 2 years and there's no drugs.
Yeah.
Um, so, the only training out there that's like that is like med school right now, like
Mhm.
nursing school, right?
Right.
You're able to administer drugs or prescribe, and that takes years, or
Mhm.
should probably.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, like people, and a lot of lack of humility. Yeah, well, I guess the opposite of hubris, right? So people just think they know things when in
Yeah.
fact we know very little right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you
Absolutely.
ever thought, Alex, about how young psychology is, like
Yeah.
relative to a lot of the other sciences, and immature generally too?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, things are coming out, have you read, Gabor Mate's new book, The Myth of Normal, yet?
Oh, not yet. I've read Saving Normal, which might be on a similar track, but I'll read that one soon.
Okay.
Was it good?
Yeah, it's similar. It's just he's discussing, how he used to behave as a practitioner once he took an SSRI, and then he just started running rampant with prescribing of like, "Oh, you have this diagnosis. Now we need to give you this medication." And how admittedly how wrong that was, and how quickly we are, especially with the younger generation coming up, is how quickly they are to be like, "Well, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have this, I have that." And then it's relinquishing responsibility of just, maybe I need to learn how to regulate. Maybe I need to do some breath work. Maybe I need to meditate. Maybe I need to not be so busy. Maybe I need to change my lifestyle a little bit, um, before jumping into taking medications. And I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place for those. There absolutely is, right? But that usually is our. I mean, that's just at least the American culture of, let me take something external to myself to fix me, versus what do I need to do and how do I look within. And I just finished the MAPS MDMA education we're calling it right now. And um the way Michael and Annie are, I mean, it was one of the best, training education experiences that I've had. But helping veterans look for that inner healing intelligence, understanding that it's within them, and it's not external. It's not more medicine. It's, how do I help myself, right? Versus the American way, which is someone else help me be better, which doesn't get you very far.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. Did you ever catch I don't know if Kyle or anybody else mentioned this before, but we kind of have a shared lineage with the Midhofers.
Yeah,
Um,
actually I talked to them about, Michael talked to me about Kyle. So, yes.
that's so great. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like through our mentors in Vermont, they used to facilitate
Mhm.
breath work together, Lenny and Elizabeth Gibson, and they all kind of studied under Groff,
Yeah.
Stan and Christina for a bit, and that was how we kind of and even Elizabeth Gibson helped write the manual for the MAPS MDMA work. Her name's in the
Mm.
credits, so that's lovely too.
Mhm.
So I'm glad you got to experience that. That's like really priceless.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of one of the catalysts for licensure. For me, my original path was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna do this work in the global south." It makes so much more sense to me. Having those experiences with those healers is, I feel grateful every time I go down there to see the work and the capabilities that they have. Um, and then the reckoning and realization that not everyone's going to do that. Not everyone wants to take ayahuasca. Not everyone wants to do psilocybin or all of those other medicines, right? And not everyone has the means. And going back to equity, right? The VA is going to start rolling out MDMA, and they won't do it perfectly. They're going to mess up, but that is going to reach a vast population to help. And to see how Michael and Annie have put that protocol together was, I was so, so impressed, and to see that they've been fighting for this for so many years, I was honestly, like, just in awe of being there and being around them. I was very grateful. But yeah, that was a big catalyst for me of, like, that is the way we reach more veterans. Specifically, obviously, that's what my demographic that I wanna help is, and, it was very motivating.
Love that. I love that. That's so great. Um, Thinking back, was the term transference that we
That
were
was it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's Monday, and I just got back last night from a retreat in Mexico, so
Oh my God. Well, thanks for toughing this out with us. That's a lot of
Of
travel.
course, of
Um,
course.
yeah. And can you tell us a little bit like how is Heroic Hearts operating right now, generally speaking? I know some people may
Mm,
know they're watching, but
mhm.
what is the group?
I mean, I think the biggest initial is that Jesse and Jared and Zach, who, have created this from nothing, their initial piece was the VA is not doing what it needs to do. The VA is failing at helping veterans. Now, they are absolutely, and I don't like to just say negative about them. I just went to the MDMA training, and 50 of the participants were VA clinical psychs and social workers. So they're absolutely
It's coming.
trying to. It's absolutely coming, and I'm grateful for that. So, but there is a gap, and that gap needed to be filled with support, and so, that was the initial why, and it's obviously grown over the years. Um, but I think they do a very phenomenal job. I mean, I'm obviously biased because I work for them, but in terms of the whole package, they are coming to you with pre and post integration, not only individually with individual coaches, but also with group integration pre, group integration post. And then that continues. We have a monthly alumni call that anyone who's ever been to a retreat can join. So there's this idea of community that continues to help people along the way. Um, and Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers of retreats that were run this year, but it was the most that we had ever done, and like I said previously, they're really one of the only other ones who, when I came into the space, they were pairing female veterans with female spouses. And I was just like, we're not the same. That's a little odd. This doesn't make sense. Guys, we need there is plenty of female veterans out there that need support. So they're the only ones who are like, you know what, you're right, and let's make that happen. Jesse's attitude is very much like, I don't know everything. Come to me and let's figure out how we can make things work. So I think that's the overall, but I do very much appreciate the level of care that is given and the desire to not just bring people down on a retreat and then be like, okay, go ahead. You just had this huge transformational experience. Now go back to the real world and try to make sense of it alone. Like that's not helpful for anyone. And yeah, so the comprehensive kind of community feeling and coaching and um, support that they provide is pretty amazing.
Mhm. I love that. And from what I understand, the process is folks donate to Heroic Hearts, and
Mhm.
Heroic Hearts can finance in part or whole people's experiences in healing to international legal locations. Has Heroic Hearts started doing anything domestically in Oregon?
Yeah, so they just did their first group retreat with psilocybin in Oregon about a month ago, I believe, and that is the plan is to continue that. Um, but forever whoever's listening, you just mentioned it. We are, a nonprofit, and funding is difficult. So if you're out there and you you see this as a way to support veterans in a really, really real way, I please ask you to support us because the trips are not for each veteran to go down to Peru, Jamaica, or Mexico. Um, we're talking 3,500 to 5,000 per person, and which is the low end. If you look at some of those really high end retreats, we're really trying to be as smart as possible with how we approach it, and And that's the same with the psilocybin in Oregon right now. It's very, very pricey. So, um, yeah, any amount of donations can help us continue to support more veterans. And I'm actually seeing it. Uh, the VA is waking up and practitioners are waking up. I got an email this past week from one of my old therapists at the Seattle VA that said very cryptically, if I was to want to send some of my patients your way, how would we do that? So, it's happening, and they're recognizing like this isn't working, and we need to do something else. So it's pretty
Hmm.
wild to see.
Yeah, that's so great. Yeah, I've been hearing some great things coming out of the Seattle and Portland VAs. I heard there was some sort of big meeting in Denver recently with a lot of VA employees talking about the future of the plan for
Hmm.
this rollout of MDMA particularly.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
it's a big deal. So one thing I was thinking recently was uh, there's more people now than ever in the history of the planet using psychedelics, as far as we know, and
Yeah.
uh, it's kind of a public health imperative to
Yeah.
understand this stuff better. And why are
Yeah.
people doing it? How are they doing it? How can we support them and make them have better outcomes? All of that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
I think VA clinicians and clinicians just everywhere really should be learning, learning what people are doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it.
Mhm. Mhm. I
Hmm.
mean, and not only learning, but I don't know if you agree on this one, but having their own experience. I think, it's quite necessary to it's not just here's an SSRI, right? MDMA is different. And I think many of them who came to that education training that we just did were very like, how do I do this too? And I don't know how we make this work, but like the underground needs to be helping in teaching these practitioners who have never had these experiences and how to understand that. And another thing that was actually really beautiful and heartwarming was at the end of that week, so many of them kind of took a step back, and when we did like a final share, had an emotional response to saying, "Wow, I have been so in my head versus in my heart in helping these veterans," and that even without MDMA being there, they wanna change the way they're engaging because, I mean, I know you probably know, right? You go through these westernized education programs, and it's very intellectually based versus, you know, how do we show up properly? How do we show up with softness and touch, right? Touch as a whole. You should have seen their faces like, "What? Well, I'm touching?" The, participants potentially or holding their hands, and that's just so far removed from how we do psychotherapy, and I think frankly how disconnected and damaging that can be. We're looking for connection. We're looking for someone to understand us and hold space for us and see us. So, I do look forward to the shift that's happening, even if it's slow.
Yeah, yeah. And on a positive note for the VA, what I like to say is it's a absolutely gigantic organization, and moving an organization like that can take a
Yeah.
long time.
Yep.
Um, they're doing a lot of good work. They're doing a
Yeah.
reasonable amount of subpar work, but they can and
Yeah.
plan to continually improve. And
Yeah.
I can tell you, there's a lot of psychedelic people inside the VA now. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Uh,
It really
Oh,
is.
it was fun. I was at this 2017 MAPS conference. I met a VA psychiatrist, and he he told me that once in a while he would slam the door, not slam the door, close the door quietly. So they had some private time in the office suite, and said, I will say that you're lying if you ever out me on this, but I think you should start researching psychedelics for your healing." And
Mm,
gave them some direction maps and a few other spots. And it was just, that some of these folks understand that their, I guess, standard of care is not where they personally want it to be,
no.
but they're kind of limited in what they're able to do, right?
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, like being around more VA practitioners has been actually very healing for me to realize one, they're people, and two, all of them joined to help. All of them desired to support, and the system as in its bureaucracy really traps you in a way and, prevents you from practicing in the way that you want, so as that slowly changes, I am hopeful. I met a VA practitioner recently that was like, I can't do it anymore, I gotta quit. And I was like, please don't, and also, go to this education for MAPS, because I promise you, there's a future ahead that is exactly what you've been wanting to do. And um the only other thing I'll say to this, and this is probably a little bit over some people's heads, but the VA system is incentivized to um, keep veterans broken, meaning they're not incentivized, but veterans are incentivized because it's based on the level of financial support that they're given, based on the rating that they have. And so if they start to lose their rating, they start to lose that financial incentive, which can be dangerous. And we have to overhaul that system in some way. And I don't frankly know what that looks like, but I hope there's a group of big brained people who can get together and determine that. But uh, that's also a piece of this.
Mm, yeah, there's so much work that needs to be done to have us improve our situation here. It seems
Hmm.
like people are ready to go, like even yourself, Alex, you're ready to go get a clinical degree and jump into the fray. What are you hoping to do? Are you hoping to be a licensed therapist or psychologist, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think Dr. Christopher, who's at the Portland VA, is already running clinical trials, and my wife and I are moving to Portland, so that's a big focus. Is he's also advocating for group therapy and how important that is in group medicine, retreats, and because it is. We don't we heal in community, not in isolation, and we need that mirroring of each other. We need that support of one another. I mean, you take from this last retreat I was at, you take the medicine out of it, say there was no medicine done. The amount of group healing that was just done by engaging with one another, meeting someone who's like-minded, who wants to heal, who wants to, you know, support themselves, and having that group dynamic together was just so beneficial. So sitting in a room with one person who's never served potentially and talking to them is just not the way forward. It's more of a group healing dynamic. So that's kind of the path. But I also am not going to stop. Michael and Annie looked at me and said, you know, you don't have to get your licensure. Like you're doing the work already in the South, with these retreats. Um, and I do wholeheartedly believe that uh, in order to respect and practice with the indigenous healers that are down there, like that is absolutely necessary. So having that balance, I think, is very important.
Mm, I love that. Looks like in the comments, people are trying from other areas of the country who are veterans are looking to connect with you. So I might shoot you their contact info later if that's okay, Alex,
Okay,
so you can
yeah,
connect. Yeah,
absolutely.
so I'm actually a friend of mine from. We did a really fun hiking trip once, so that's great. I love that. And have you met Gina Grazza in Portland yet?
No.
She's a therapist in Portland. I think
Hmm.
collaborates with Chris Toffer a little bit, and
Okay.
check her out on the podcast if you're up for it later. Gina Grazza, pretty
Okay.
compelling individual that I'll try to link you up with as well.
Great.
Um, yeah, I'm excited. You're going to Portland. That's fun. I think it's a population that needs help for sure.
Yeah.
Oregon being legal state, that alone is a big deal. Not to mention VA work,
Absolutely.
substantial work.
Absolutely. I actually was talking with the board, or I don't know, the chief operating officer, what their role is, but the head of Minority Veterans of America. And we just got a huge grant to buy a house in Seattle and help homeless veterans move into the house. And, I kind of said back to them, that's great, but that's not long lasting. What's long lasting is healing. And so if we're going to help, the homeless population, for veterans, like we need to get them this level of healing so then they can then have a house to go into and then, start to slowly put the pieces of where they want to be in their life back together. But just providing someone a place to lay their head, that maybe that's the first step, but it's not the only step. You have to look at it from a holistic perspective for sure.
Absolutely. So is there anything else we might want to dig into here? Like, did we do enough discussion on DEI topics in the military,
Hmm.
and at the VA, or
I
psychedelic
think
healing
so.
generally?
I think one of the things I've been working with David at Vital for the last 6 months, 8 months on an intersectionality course that will hopefully
Mm,
come out in the spring of 2024. Kind of talking about the intersections of identity and psychedelics and how we approach both of those things with care and compassion and properly, kind of things we've already talked about, but um the necessity of education for that, because so often, so many people I've gone to, like we talked about, of well, why is that needed, why do we need to worry about that, and it is needed because there's a lot of people, especially getting out of, I'm just going to focus on that, especially getting out of the military, is that wake up call of, "Ooh, who did I just work for? What did I just," you know, you've been code switching, or what's the other word that I'm looking for? Um, surviving in a space that is not accepting of you, and there's a lot of anger that comes when you get out and you realize that, and how to approach healing and supporting someone who is a marginalized identity. And this is just not, that's not even the veteran space, right? Who's a marginalized identity, and what they need, and why that matters. And also focusing on, people, anyone in this space should very much be aware of the impact, and we talked about this in the Vital course, of the war on drugs and how it disproportionately impacted, the BIPOC community, and LGBT. I mean, I don't know if you've read Queering Psychedelics, that,
not
Chief
yet.
Luna,
I
but,
haven't.
the level of history within the psychedelic space, that psychedelics were used against, to try to, make us straight again. Um, it's painful, and it needs to be a topic that people are aware of.
Mm, yeah, I saw some people kind of push back on psychedelics, mental health, and all this stuff on account of uh,
I don't know if you can hear me, but I lost that last part, so hopefully the streaming could still hear you. Might have been my service, though. Hmm. It might be me, though. It might we're using the Starlink, so sometimes that's not that reliable. Just me now here, guys. I wish I could see the chat so I could talk to the audience, but I can't.
we might be good now. I'm
There
sad
you
to see.
are.
Oh my goodness.
Can you
Sorry
hear
about
me?
that. Yes.
Okay, great. What were you saying?
Oh, who knows? I was just kind of enforcing your point about how like psychiatry, psychology, psychedelics have all been used as weapons against many populations, and it's not
Yeah.
great. We really need to dig our way out of that and
Yeah.
apologize. Let's start there.
Hmm.
Acknowledge the harms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then where can we go from there?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, it goes back to the why of why do we need retreats that are for those individual groups, because there is fear around these medicines because of that, right? There's this apprehension of, well, I don't, before that white guy served it and he was trying to make me straight or something, or that person brought harm to me. Why would I want that again? So yeah, just understanding that, and that's not to say that, like, I'm placing this upward blame on the people currently in the space. It's just that we need a level of awareness and a level of compassion to say, okay, maybe I'm not the best person to help you, but I have a network of people that can. We talk about that a lot in the vital course of knowing your scope of practice and knowing when it's okay to say, oh, I'm just a coach. This might be out of my, not just a coach, but this is might be out of my scope. I need support here, and reaching out to your network to get that person the help that they need.
Amen. Yeah, I think one of the biggest pluses for this kind of community-based approach is like we don't have to do everything alone. Nobody
No.
should think they have to do everything alone. You have billions of people on the planet. At least
Mhm.
two or three should be able to help you. And if you come to the right places and the right communities, events, webinars, whatever, you might find
Yeah.
those people. And that's kind of what we were hoping for with Vital. People can self-organize. Like as
Yeah.
we know, the legal situation in the country is a little choppy, a little rough right now.
Yeah.
And psychedelics today is a very public organization, can't necessarily do certain things that we would love to do that we think are ethical on account of risks. But
Mhm.
if we get people together that don't have such a big profile, people might choose to do the right thing,
Mhm.
whatever that is, legally
Right.
or otherwise.
And that Joe, that goes back to having humility. Having humility in the space, and knowing that you're not the only person and that you do need help. And just because, even if you've been working in the space in the underground for 15, 20 years, it doesn't mean there's not more to learn or more to understand and more that we can learn from each other. Um, yeah, it's just taking a step back and acknowledging that we're all novices. There's so much we don't know. I mean, can't imagine what we're going to learn in the next 20, 30 years. So yeah.
Like that phrase right there is the essence of it. Like we're going to learn
Mhm,
so much. It's going to be so
mhm.
exciting. We're going to help gazillions of people.
Yeah.
And, you know, the pipe dream is saving the planet. We'll see. But, at the very
Absolutely.
least, we can walk each other home.
Yes,
Allah Ram Das,
absolutely.
right?
Love that.
Yeah. Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining us. I hope we can do it again. I had a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
um, I wish you luck on your move to Portland. Anything else you'd like to say as we wrap?
No, it was a pleasure, and, appreciate all that you guys are doing, and, keep it up, keep educating, because it matters. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Have a good one.
You too.